So recently, Oricon released the top 5 manga in terms of recent sales in Japan, and at first glance, everything is what you'd expect. Demon Slayer taking the #1 spot with its massive amount of popularity, on top of the fact it recently ended, and One Piece just behind it. In general, they're all manga that are pretty well known, with My Hero still maintaining a lot of popularity, and the quintessential quintuplets being another popular manga that ended recently. Except hold on, Kingdom? What's that? Out of those 5, I've practically never heard anyone talk about that manga. Hell, even looking on my anime list, it's number 8 out of the top 10 manga on the entire site. How is it that there's a series on that level that practically nobody seems to know about? Well, let's get into that. Hello everyone, this is the RPG Monger, and by the end of this video, hopefully I'll have convinced each and every one of you to get into Kingdom. But first, let me set the stage. Debuting back in 2006 on Weekly Young Jump, Kingdom is a historical seinen manga that on the surface doesn't really appear to be very unique. For one, in terms of structure, Kingdom follows the age-old formula of the protagonist starting from nothing and slowly but surely rising up to be the best of the best. In Kingdom's case, one of the greatest generals the world had ever seen. But beyond that base, Kingdom sets itself aside from the rest of its peers. Utilizing some pretty incredible art for a manga that updates weekly, Kingdom takes place in the Warring States period of China, where 7 different kingdoms were constantly at war for supremacy over the country. In terms of the story, we follow the exploits of a young man named Shin, who starting out as a mere servant aims to work from the bottom up to become a great general. And once he meets Eisei, the newest king of the Qin dynasty, their goal becomes the unification of the entirety of China, with the rest of the story revolving around the long and arduous journey to arrive at that lofty goal. So great, as far as premises go, Kingdoms is a pretty solid one, being one of the reasons I even picked the manga up in the first place. But while that's all good and whatnot, the story's true strengths lie deeper within. To make it simple, I'll separate them into 4 different points: the characters, the campaigns, the stakes, and the art. Starting with the characters, like many other long-running manga, one of Kingdom's best qualities are its massive, ever-growing cast of characters. Because with the manga being based off of a pretty massive historical period, nearly every individual that could be important, from the soldiers Shin fights alongside all the way up to certain key figures in the royal palace, are fully fleshed out characters. It's crazy how large the cast becomes the further you get into the story, with each new character not only being entirely unique, but also equipped with their own personality and set of values. And this extends to the enemies in the story as well, with the unending amount of generals, commanders, and so on being pretty fleshed out as well. Though that aside, for me personally, like another certain long-running manga, one of the most enjoyable things is just being able to see each and every character grow over time. Especially since with Kingdom's massive cast of characters, the constant evolution of every personality introduced is truly something to behold. And when one of those highly fleshed out characters ends up getting killed off, oh man, does it hurt twice as much. Like straight up, whereas most series only have a few solid death scenes, if any at all, when it comes to the fleshed out characters, Kingdom is the king of hitting you where it hurts, even with the deaths of enemies sometimes. I won't go into specifics, but in one arc of the manga, there's an enemy general whose character is honestly not outwardly evil or bad-natured in the slightest. He's just an antagonist because of the fact he's on the opposing side of the war from Shin. So in the end, after a long battle, the general ends up getting defeated, and while you're pretty relieved and glad the Qin army was able to succeed over him, you can't help but feel a twinge of sadness about the whole affair, since with the way the general was set up and once you learn about his background, you end up gaining a sense of respect for the character, even though they'd now passed away. And let me tell you, this is the kind of stuff Kingdom pulls all the time. However, before I actually lose myself in rambling, moving on to the next point, let's talk campaigns. While it takes Kingdom a second to actually reach one, whenever the story hits a campaign, it's just non-stop action. Each chapter melding with the next one as the tide of war perpetually shifts from Shin's favor to the enemies until one is victorious. And it's not just the solid fight scenes that make Kingdom's campaigns a highlight either. Take the tactics. Pretty much exactly as important as the fights themselves, Kingdom constantly throws new tactics at you with each war, making every new battlefield unknown territory for Shin and the Qin army to overcome. Not to mention, whenever tacticians on the allied sides pull off an incredible stunt, it only complements the already insane battles, leading to some legendary moments. Plus, taking into account those aforementioned characters, they add a much needed color to the battlefield, only further distinguishing each campaign from the next. But above all, when talking about Kingdom's campaigns, and really the entire manga in general, I can't neglect to mention my next point, the stakes. In pretty much every campaign and arc of Kingdom, the manga practically ensnares you with what's at stake, whether it be a piece of land that grants Qin the advantage in its ultimate goal to unite China, or a force powerful enough to annihilate all of Qin. And what with Kingdom being based on true events recorded in history, even though most major events of the manga are set in stone, it's these stakes that keep things exciting, each arc somehow raising them. Hell, when I was reading through the Coalition arc, one of the best arcs in all of Kingdom, I physically couldn't put the manga down for the entire day, as with each and every chapter ending on a cliffhanger of some sort, I just had to know how they'd get out of this one. Plus, campaigns aren't the only nail-biters Kingdom has to offer, because while Shin is out fighting on the front lines, Sei is fighting just as much on the political front. Like seriously, I have never read a manga that's made politics as intense and exciting as Kingdom somehow manages to. I won't say much so you all can go read it yourselves, but trust me, it's good stuff. Though now, with the first 3 points done, let's touch on the main thing that binds all of this together, the art of Kingdom. From smaller scenes between a few characters to massive large-scale battles, the art in Kingdom is consistently great. I mean, just look at some of it. That's about all I need to say. Combined with all the great writing, it's the art that makes up the other half of Kingdom, providing the much-needed intensity of war with the extremely detailed art of campaigns. So there you go, that's Kingdom. If you've never heard of it before this video, it's sounding pretty good right about now, right? Though again, now that you all know why Kingdom is great, it only begs the question even more, how do so few people know about it in the West? Hell, I even experimented with asking my Twitter followers if they followed Kingdom, and only 15% even knew about it. Like, what's the deal? Did Kingdom just never get an anime to its name? That's usually how these series become more popular over here. Oh wait, it did? All the way back in 2012? Well, why didn't you say so? Let's look at the Kingdom anime. Wait. No, really? Oh no. It got berserked. Yup, yet another manga with fantastic art getting the bad CG treatment. Granted, it's not on the level of bad as Berserk, as I mean, you really have to try to mess things up that much, and just to be clear, I'm not one of those people that indiscriminately avoids anime done in CG. There's definitely a way to make CG anime look just as good, and there are countless examples of it, but even then, I kind of understand why not too many people gave the anime a shot, especially in 2012 of all things. If it had come out in a less hectic time for anime, maybe more people would have latched onto it. But what with popular shows like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Hunter x Hunter, and more airing during the same anime seasons as Kingdom, any chances for it to gain a spotlight would end up being effectively snuffed out. Especially when this is what greets people in the very first episode. Like hell, even after the first few episodes, the Kingdom anime honestly has more 2D animation than a lot of anime that rely predominantly on CG, with the CG later on in the show not even bothering me too much either. At the end of the day, it was unfortunately purely a matter of budget, which Kingdom's first season wouldn't have a lot of. But here's where things get interesting, and even sadder for those wanting more people to get into Kingdom. After the first few episodes of the Kingdom anime would prove to chase away any potential new fans for the manga, the second season of the anime would be done in almost entirely 2D. Granted, CG would continue to be used for more practical reasons like background soldiers and the large-scale scenes, but it didn't detract from the show at all. Finally, an anime with poor CG that actually improves itself. If only that could have happened with Berserk. Seriously, if only the Kingdom anime would have had a bit more budget to start out like this and not like this, I can almost guarantee you Kingdom would be much more popular outside of Japan. Though it doesn't end there. After season 2, 6 years later, Kingdom would get a third season, and wouldn't you know it, once again, the quality became even better somehow, which is great considering the third season is adapting one of, if not the best arc in all of Kingdom. The only issue here is what with the Attack on Titan level gap between season 2 and 3, there's a pretty good chance that the few fans the anime managed to attain would lose interest in Kingdom during those 6 long years. But now, this is where I come in. It is absolutely criminal that the Kingdom community outside of Japan is so fragmented and small, and if if I have any way to change that, I'll take that chance. First and foremost, if you're the kind of person who gets intimidated when faced with a manga this long, don't worry, you and I are the same. It takes a lot for me to get into these kinds of manga, and Kingdom was just the kind to ensnare me. Though even then, if you prefer watching the anime instead of reading, here's my guide for you. Unless you want to sit through this, read the manga up until chapter 174, in which case after that, you can switch over to the second season of the anime, because in general, as far as adaptations go, Kingdoms is pretty faithful, only missing a few minor arcs and some of the more heavy gore and violent scenes being toned down or censored somewhat. And even though at the moment season 3 is on an indefinite hiatus due to that funny little pandemic that's ravaged the world, from the 4 episodes of it that are out, it's extremely promising. However, if any of you do watch the second season and switch back to the manga after the fact, the arc after what season 2 covers starts at chapter 262. But for those of you who don't mind, by all means read Kingdom. If my word isn't enough, just take all the points I talked about earlier in the video. If any of that piqued your interest at all, there's a pretty good chance you'll like Kingdom. And for the people watching who do follow Kingdom, you guys have a job as well. Spread this video around as much as you physically can, because if there's a time to get people into the series, it'd be now. Granted, at the moment, Kingdom somehow still hasn't had its manga officially released in the West, so you will have to resort to your manga reading site of choice. But when the manga actually does get an official release, by all means support that so more volumes can come out over here. Though anyways, all that being said, even though I'm not even fully caught up with Kingdom at the moment, Kingdom has rapidly become one of my favorite manga ever, even vying for the position of my favorite seinen manga against Steel Ball Run and Berserk. And hey, the manga itself isn't even done, still having a good way to go before the grand finale of the series. In the end, please read it. I guarantee you it's worth your time. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, do subscribe, and today's cool thing of the day is Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. Coming from someone whose experience with the series was only Sticker Star up until now, yeah, I know. The Thousand-Year Door has really opened my eyes to how good Paper Mario games can be. Like hell, now that I've seen the truth, how did they jump from this to this? It makes no sense, man. And hey, if you're a fan of the game too, I'm currently streaming my blind run of it over on my Twitch.
Well, I suppose I could apologize for letting you...
Oh no. 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 So do stop by and chat. But that being said, I'm the RPG Monger, and don't forget that each and every one of you are fantastic.